The story I am going to tell today is an event that happened in a province in the eastern region. When Manny went to the field to carry out a mission, he and several other soldiers unexpectedly faced something unforeseen. Every step they took was filled with bizarre and terrifying experiences, causing even the bravest of soldiers to get goosebumps. Before we dive into our scary story, we would like to ask everyone to like and subscribe to support us in continuing to bring you more terrifying tales in the future. The entire story must take everyone back to around the year 2013. At that time, Manny was conscripted to serve as a soldier in a province in the eastern region. After completing his training, he was stationed at a company. Then he was assigned to various forces in the area. When Manny had been with the force for about 3 to 4 months, he had to go out on a mission. At that time, his unit received orders for 3 missions: patrolling, setting up checkpoints, and displaying force at the border. His unit consisted of about 30 soldiers. Then they went out to perform the mission. They assembled for a meeting at the Special Task Force unit to plan which squad would do what. The conclusion of that meeting was that Squad 1 and the military headquarters would set up checkpoints, while Squad 2 and Squad 3 would go out to patrol the area. For this patrol, they would have to join forces with forest officials who were familiar with the area and skilled in navigating the local forests. Manny's unit stayed overnight at the Special Task Force unit. The next morning, they took a vehicle to meet the forest officials. However, there seemed to be some miscommunication because when they arrived at the destination, none of the forest officials were there. They then learned that the officials had gone to patrol another area. At that point, the lieutenant in charge, who was somewhat stubborn, told all the soldiers it was fine. He said they could go in on their own since they were soldiers and had been in many forests before. They had maps, so there was no reason to wait. This resulted in all the soldiers in the squad having to go on a forest patrol without any forest officials accompanying them. All the soldiers were ordered to transfer to another vehicle to go set up a base and then start patrolling. That night, everyone prepared their gear and went to bed early to rest for the mission the next day. The schedule for the mission was to start patrolling at 7 a.m. the next morning. The next morning, Manny and all the soldiers set off as scheduled. After the driver had driven them from the base for about half an hour, they dropped Squad 2 off at a village. Squad 3, which Manny was part of, had to drive for another 30 minutes to reach their destination, another village. Upon arriving at the second village, after all the soldiers had disembarked, the squad leader informed them that he had forgotten to bring water. The soldiers then had to go to the village temple to ask the monks for water. When they asked the monks for help, the monks inquired about their purpose. After the soldiers explained that they were there to patrol, the monks warned them to be wary of 3 things in the area: horses, wood, and mon. Curious, Manny asked what the monk meant. The monk explained that horses referred to methamphetamine, wood referred to illegal logging, and mon were the minority groups from neighboring countries. He advised that if they encountered these people in the forest and were told anything by them, they should be skeptical. Then the monk suggested they take a shortcut through the forest behind the temple. All the soldiers headed in the direction the monk had indicated. When they crossed the stream behind the temple, they entered a mountainous area where there weren't many large trees. There were only clumps of bamboo and tall grass covering the area. At that time, his squad walked along a narrow path, so narrow that they couldn't walk side by side and had to walk in single file. After walking in the forest for a while, suddenly, there were 3 loud gunshots. Immediately, the soldiers walking in front of Manny started running. Manny ran after them without knowing the reason, but he heard sounds ahead that seemed like many people running away into the forest. When he looked ahead, he saw traces of disturbed grass but no sign of anyone. After a while, the squad leader told them to stop running, saying it was too late. Manny quickly asked what had happened. The squad leader explained that they had encountered about 10 people ahead, including children. When these people saw the soldiers, they all scattered and ran. The squad leader decided to fire 3 shots into the air to scare them and hope they would stop running, but it was ineffective. After finishing his story, the squad leader ordered them to continue walking. After about 2 hours, they reached a reservoir that was completely dry. The squad leader ordered them to walk across to the other side of the reservoir. As they were almost to the other side, a woman on a motorcycle approached them, but upon seeing the soldiers, she quickly turned around and rode away suspiciously. Realizing they couldn't catch up with her, Manny's group decided to let her go and continued their patrol until noon, when they reached a small village deep in the forest. As they entered the village, the first person they saw was a woman bathing at a well in the village center. The soldiers were surprised by her reaction because she didn't even glance at them, as if she couldn't see the group of 10 soldiers. As they continued walking, Manny's friend Ben whispered to him, "Wow, she's beautiful." After passing the woman, they saw people dyeing fabric and weaving mats in the next house. What was strange was that none of the villagers seemed to pay any attention to Manny's group. The soldiers started discussing why the village seemed so strange and why the villagers ignored them. The squad leader dismissed it, saying they would be out of the forest soon and shouldn't worry about it. Manny's group continued walking until they reached the edge of the forest, where they encountered a man sitting with his back to them, appearing to be watching something with 2 dogs beside him. In front of the man was a small pond. The squad leader approached the man and asked what he was doing there. The man, startled, replied that he was fishing. The squad leader, suspicious, asked why he had no fishing rods and accused him of poaching. The man insisted he was fishing. Manny's group searched the man and found 8 shotgun shells but no gun. The squad leader ordered the soldiers to search the area for the hidden gun, but they found nothing. The squad leader then told the man he was trespassing in a national park and could be arrested. The man argued back, saying he had lived there and hunted for a long time without any problems. After arguing for a while, the man suggested they talk to his village headman. The squad leader asked which village he was from, and the man pointed back to the village Manny's group had just passed, saying he lived there. Just then, another middle-aged man emerged from the forest, asking what was happening. The man talking to the squad leader immediately turned to the newcomer, calling him the village headman. The man complained to the headman that the soldiers were trying to arrest him. The headman angrily argued that they had been living and hunting there without any legal issues and demanded to know who the soldiers were. The argument escalated, with the headman threatening to bring the subdistrict head and the local government chief to resolve the issue. He then walked back to the village, and the squad leader decided to follow him to clear things up, leaving Manny's group to guard the man. As soon as the squad leader left, the man ran into the forest, and Manny's group chased after him, shouting. The squad leader, seeing this, ran back, but the headman had disappeared. The soldiers stood confused, wondering where they had gone. They decided to return to the strange village, thinking the people must be there. However, after walking back for 2 hours, they couldn't find the village they had left just 5 minutes earlier and realized they were lost in the forest. At that moment, the sergeant tried to reassure everyone that their trip had not been in vain since they had already taken photographs as evidence. They then began their return to base. However, this time they stumbled upon a cliff, making it clear to all the soldiers that they were indeed lost in the forest. The path they were taking back seemed completely unfamiliar. The soldiers continued to follow their map until twilight, eventually coming across a house in the middle of the forest. The surrounding terrain was a basin, surrounded by mountains with scattered rubber trees, and the house was situated right in the middle of this basin. The soldiers agreed to approach the house to ask for directions and some water. Despite the difficult path, they finally made it to the house, which was a single-story wooden structure with a thatched roof. There was a well in front of the house. When they knocked on the door seeking help, a male voice responded, telling them to come in. Inside, they found an elderly man, around 60 years old, lying sick on a bed. Manny asked him why he was lying down and if he lived alone. The old man weakly replied that he lived with his daughters, who had gone out to buy medicine. He explained that he was paralyzed. Manny assured the old man that they only needed some water. The old man directed them to the well in front of the house. After filling their containers, they asked the old man for directions to get out of the forest. The man advised them to head straight from the side of his house to find a road and then turn right to reach a village. Before leaving, Manny's group asked the old man again if he indeed lived only with his two daughters. He confirmed this and added that his daughters had been gone for a long time. The soldiers, feeling concerned, decided to stay with the old man in case he needed anything, but he insisted it wasn't necessary as his daughters would return much later, and the path out of the forest was still long. After some discussion, they decided to leave immediately. As they walked away, they saw a motorcycle headlight approaching from the direction they were heading. Thinking it might be the old man's daughters, they flagged down the motorcycle but found it was a man with a fishing basket. They asked him for directions out of the forest, and he instructed them to walk straight for 500 meters until they saw a T-junction, then turn left to reach the village and the main road. Following the man's directions, they walked for a long time but did not find the T-junction or any sign of a village. Instead, it seemed they were going deeper into the forest and they had no flashlights. They decided to stop and discuss what to do next, recalling the monk's warning about horse, wood, mon. Deciding not to follow the villagers' directions, they chose a different path and eventually found a village. They asked the villagers where they were and radioed for a vehicle to pick them up. They waited for over an hour before the vehicle arrived. The driver, surprised at how far they had gone, remarked that they were in a different district, almost at the border of a neighboring country. Back at the base, they reported their mission to the lieutenant. A forest ranger, who had been with them, questioned why they didn't wait for the rangers before entering the forest. The sergeant explained that the lieutenant ordered them to proceed and recounted their experiences, including the mysterious village. The forest ranger expressed disbelief, noting that he had surveyed the area before and had never seen such a village. Curious about this, the ranger invited Manny's team to join them for another exploration of the forest the next day. The lieutenant approved this plan. The next morning, Manny's group patrolled the same area with the forest rangers, starting from where they exited the forest the previous day, hoping to find the village again. However, they only found a solitary well in the middle of the forest, where they had previously seen a woman bathing. The surrounding area was an open space with no sign of a village. While they were discussing this, Manny's friend Ben started to smile as if he wanted to say something, but then suddenly ran off. Manny chased after him to ask what was wrong, but Ben just said there was nothing and rejoined the group. All of them explored until they found a single-story wooden house in the forest, the same place where they had requested water the previous day. At that moment, the sergeant began to explain to the forest officials that they had encountered this house and asked for help. However, the forest officials looked puzzled and asked who they had asked for water from, stating that the house was abandoned. Instantly, everyone spoke in unison, asserting that they had indeed asked for water there the previous day. Hearing this, the forest officials insisted on taking the soldiers to investigate the house. After exploring the area in the morning, all the soldiers saw for themselves that it was indeed an abandoned house, which seemed to have been deserted for many years. The well from which they had drawn water the previous day was filled with cobwebs, but at the bottom, there were fresh marks, presumably from when they had taken water the day before. Seeing this, Manny was astonished. Furthermore, the forest officials mentioned that there were graves of a father and daughter behind the house. When everyone went to see, they found 2 graves made of bricks, which seemed to have been opened to cremate the bodies. But one of the graves had a red shirt lying inside. What they had encountered the previous night left Manny feeling an indescribable eeriness. Then they all walked back to the dried reservoir they had seen the day before. Upon reaching the ridge of the reservoir, they spotted the same woman in red they had encountered before, riding a motorcycle. She seemed startled upon seeing the group, then turned around and drove away. At that moment, the forest officials were perplexed and asked Manny and his group what was happening. Manny then asked the forest officials if they had seen the woman on the motorcycle who had just driven away, explaining that she was the same woman they had seen the previous day. However, it seemed that the forest officials did not see the woman like Manny and his group did. The forest officials then started to explain that in the past, this area had been the scene of a murder, and the victims were the paralyzed father and his daughter, the owners of the abandoned house they had initially explored. The old man had waited for his daughter until he died in the house. After hearing the full story from the forest officials, Manny took the opportunity to talk to Ben about what had scared him and caused him to run away. Ben explained that while they were walking, he had planned to tease Manny about whether the woman was waiting to bathe for them. But when he turned towards Manny, he actually saw the woman standing by the well, bathing. What scared him and made him run away was seeing her skin peeling off as she poured water over herself, which made him unable to look at the well again. The incident that day ended with a sense of mystery, and the next mission for Manny's team was to conduct a show of force. They had to travel to an area near the border where an immigration checkpoint was located. Upon reaching the base, Manny found that some sergeants had already been stationed there. The team, including Manny, consisted of 7 soldiers in total. Upon arrival, they immediately held a meeting to discuss their sleeping arrangements within the base. However, there were not enough sleeping spaces, so Manny and 3 other soldiers were assigned to sleep in a small house near the base, which they did not mind. The small house was an old, elevated wooden structure that appeared to have sunk slightly, evident from the lower staircase compared to the house. Additionally, a coconut tree branch had pierced through the roof, and the front door was nailed shut. Despite the dilapidated state of the house, the soldiers did not care much and set up their sleeping areas on the porch. Manny slept first across the stairs, followed by another soldier across the door, and the remaining 2 further along the porch. That night, they held another meeting to discuss their plan for the mission, which involved silently walking out of the base to catch the offenders unnoticed. After the meeting, they all went to bed. After Manny had been asleep for a while, he was startled awake by the sound of 3 knocks. He turned to ask Travis, who slept next to him, if he had heard the same noise. However, when he looked, Travis was no longer there, and only the other two soldiers remained. The other two soldiers woke up and looked at Manny. Manny then scanned the surroundings and noticed that the previously nailed-shut door was now pried open. Out of curiosity, he peeked inside and saw Travis kneeling inside the house. Manny quickly shook Travis, who seemed unconscious. After shaking him vigorously, Travis did not respond. So Manny dragged him outside and continued shaking him until Travis finally regained consciousness. Confused, Travis asked Manny why he was waking him up, to which Manny explained that Travis must have sleepwalked into the house. Travis could not remember any of the preceding events and then went back to sleep. The following evening, they prepared for their mission. However, the sergeant who was supposed to guide them was caught up in urgent business. Manny's team decided to proceed on their own, asking the sergeant to draw a map and mark key points. The sergeant stressed the importance of being quiet and not trusting anyone in the area, as there were enemy informants everywhere. The area was about 10 kilometers away from the base, and Manny's team consisted of 6 soldiers, 2 sergeants and 4 privates, including Manny. They started their journey at 8 p.m., walking silently along a desolate road where houses were spaced far apart. When they reached the first community, they noticed the strange behavior of the villagers. As they passed each house, villagers would peek out from their doors and ask where the soldiers were headed. The team responded that they were patrolling the area, and the villagers would quickly close their doors. After passing the first community, they encountered another village with houses set some distance apart. This village seemed to lack electricity. At the first house Manny inspected, he saw 3 teenagers sitting around a fire in front of the house. They were shirtless and behaving strangely, as if under the influence of drugs. Manny asked the team leader about the teenagers, but the leader advised ignoring them since their mission did not involve this area and focusing on the teenagers would distract from their main objective. As they walked past the second and third houses, they noticed similar fires in front. Manny assumed the villagers were likely under the influence of drugs. However, when they reached the fourth house, they saw a fire on the roof and 3 people standing around it. One person was making gestures as if embracing the fire. They were about 100 meters away, standing in a dark spot out of sight. Manny whispered to his nearby friend about the odd behavior at the fourth house. Suddenly, the man making gestures turned to look at him, as if he had heard the whisper, though Manny had barely spoken aloud. The man then jumped off the 2-meter-high roof and started running towards them. Manny urgently asked the team leader what to do, but the leader stood frozen in shock. The man approaching them was holding a machete, causing Manny to panic and repeatedly ask for instructions. In the moment of crisis, Manny decided that if the man tried to attack him, he would shoot the man in the leg to stop him. As the man got closer, raising his machete, Manny glanced back at his fellow soldiers, who were standing in stunned silence. When he looked back at the man, he saw that it was not a person but a dark shadow in human form, closing in on him with a raised arm, preparing to strike. But then the shadow abruptly stopped, lowered its arm, and ran back to the roof to resume its ritual around the fire. The team leader eventually regained his composure and ordered everyone to return to the base. They decided to report that they had reached the target area but found no illegal activity. The team returned to the base safely, and the next morning, after debriefing, Manny angrily confronted the team leader about why he hadn't ordered them to shoot when the shadowy figure charged at them. The leader retorted that the figure was aiming for him, not Manny. Manny argued with the leader, feeling wronged. He then questioned his fellow soldiers about their inaction, to which they all replied that they believed the shadow was targeting them individually. Manny then shared the story with a senior sergeant, who explained that criminals often paid villagers to watch for intruders. The dark shadow they saw was likely a black magic guardian used by people from a neighboring country to protect the area. The first village they passed was real, but the second village was possibly inhabited by ghosts. The senior sergeant also asked Manny about any unusual experiences while staying at the old house. Manny recounted Travis's sleepwalking incident. Travis, who was present, then remembered and shared his own experience from that night. He had woken to a voice calling him, saw a monk's head peeking through the door, and followed him inside. The monk asked Travis to bow, and when he did, Travis's head hit something. Looking up, he saw the monk hanging by the neck. The monk's body jerked 3 times, and Travis, in shock, convulsed and pounded the floor, causing the knocking sound Manny heard. The senior sergeant explained that the house they stayed in was an abandoned monk's quarters. The area used to be a monastery for wandering monks, and the villagers had built the house as a monk's dwelling. However, something had happened that led the monk to end his life by hanging.